log on. Usually take about 60 seconds early on to get their notice out. If you're watching this at a later time, you can always subscribe, click the follow button on Brantford 7, or click the follow button on the Steve Mazikane podcast Facebook page. And we'll be promoting that a little bit more. So in some more discussions on political things leading up to the podcast every day at 4 o'clock. So if you want to follow the Steve Mazikane podcast on Facebook, that may be helpful if you're interested in having conversations and putting input in some of the topics that we discuss either before or after the daily podcast. But we'll get going here. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I'm Steve Mazikane. This is the Steve Mazikane podcast. It is October 20th. We have 2 weeks to go before Election Day, and we have every elected official I'm talking to is pretty busy. They have a lot going on right now, a lot of forums, a lot of discussions. It's after 4 o'clock, and I'm looking at the stock market, and for some reason, Netflix is crashing. I'm guessing they put out a terrible, 174 earnings per share versus their estimate of 214. So might be time to buy Netflix on a dip. In any event, and people ask me on a regular basis what I buy. I swing trade. So I'll buy something and hold it for 3 or 4 days and get rid of it. I'm in a negative trade now in DraftKings, which I might add to, and I am in CVS, which is positive. I like CVS a lot. They're hiring a lot of people. When this virus, when a vaccine comes out, I think CVS will be key in distributing that vaccine. They have the infrastructure set up for it. So I like them as a company long-term anyway, but that's what I'm in right now. Although looking at Netflix, I may buy it after hours if I can. So since people asked that question, we'll discuss that. Talking about today, we're going to talk about a little bit of PURA. I'm going to read something from Robin Comey that she put out yesterday about the public hearing that's happening and that proposed bill. We'll talk about polling and the role of momentum in polling. It's less about what the numbers tell you now, but over a specific period of time. And we got a lot of questions yesterday through email on the Black Lives Matter resolution put forth by Brantford Democrats. We'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end as well. Nobody was happy about it. Listen, it is right now the Black Lives Matter, the police accountability, all of those is the most polarizing topic you can have. And I can tell you now, Robin Comey, Christine Cohen, Scanlon are, battling for their vote on that police bill while the opposition is attacking them for that vote. And that's a rightful, there could be different opinions on that. But to jump in the middle of this, like the Brantford Democrats have on a local level, and try to infuse that in local government, one, is stupid. But two, it's just a massive middle finger to the police department. They're dealing with getting attacked constantly. It is a massive middle finger to them. I am shocked, but not really. I've said this before. The Brantford Democratic Party, not every Democrat in Brantford. I'm a registered Democrat in Brantford. The DTC, the Democratic Town Committee, is crazy. It's just not right in the head. There's something seriously wrong. They're taking terrible advice. There's a new kid, forgot his name, who works for the state Senate, just moved to Brantford and is now the chairman of the Brantford Democratic Town Committee. So Republican side, you have the Jamie Cosgroves of the world, Brantford People Forever. Ray Graham is the chairman of the Republican Party, Brantford People Forever. Then on the Democratic side, you have a kid who's just moved here, who's a career politician, who has political ambitions. He's not thinking about Brantford. He's thinking, how do I beat Jamie Cosgrove in the next election so I can put it on my resume and get a better job? That's not what we want in this town. That's not what we want in any town. But then you get this stupid crap like this, like resolutions. Throw in Tom Brockett, who has a history of nuts, just crazy stuff. And you have what you have right now. It's not right. And it's amazing because conversation I just had earlier with someone, Guilford Democrats, drastically different. Logical, reasonable, intelligent, lifelong people on it, not absurd, not over the top. They have their talking points, but reasonable people. And then you get to Brantford, and I don't know what's wrong with the Democratic Party. I am a former member of the Democratic Town Committee. It wasn't really that way when I was there, but it has gone, I think, nuts in the last 5 or 6 years. It just doesn't make any sense. In any event, it'll be interesting to watch the next year as they try to make local politics as national as humanly possible. It's not right. I don't think it'll work, but you never know. So let's start with PURA. And I only want to go through this because, sometimes we are caught up on what's important right now, like the storms and power back, and we're angry. And then when the hearing happens to fix the problem down the road, we haven't really given it much thought. And so Robin Comey sent this out yesterday. He goes, this week, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, PURA, will hold public hearings on the performance of Eversource Energy and United Eliminating during Tropical Storm Isaias, and they will need to hear your experience. I'm guessing it won't just be that tropical storm. It'll also be that outage that Branford had right afterwards. If you'd like to offer testimony, there's a process for that. But here's what the new bill does. In the aftermath of the tropical storm, we heard from an overwhelming number of residents that Eversource and United Illuminating failed to adequately respond to the storm and inform customers. Last month, we passed significant reforms to hold these companies accountable. The bill, known as Take Back Our Grid, enacts the following. Hold on one second. So here are the details. Establishes performance-based rate making, where PURA sets standards the utilities must meet, develops metrics for determining progress, and allows the issuance of penalties if the utilities fail to meet the standard. Now, that's great. I'll just talk about this for a second. But PURA is going to set standards that the utility companies tells them they can meet. So PURA doesn't really have much power here. At the end of the day, the power companies have all the power. So they can try to enforce this stuff. That's likely not going to happen. Or they're just going to say, listen, it's like somebody's trying to lose weight and we set your goal at £1 a week. Yeah, you can do it. There's nothing pressing that you won't be able to do that. Most people can do that. The same thing will happen here. Requires utilities to provide $25 daily bill credits and $250 daily claim for food and medicine, as well as reduced charges to residential customers without power lasting more than 96 hours. Ties the portion of executive salaries that come from ratepayers to the company's performance. Develops minimum staffing levels for linemen, communications personnel, and others to make sure the utilities respond to storms quickly and convey timely information to their customers. We are staying on it and working to provide residents like you relief during these already challenging times. So here's the problem. If there were never storms, this would be easy. You'd be predictable. But do you keep your staffing level at a point where you expect 4 or 5 major storms and then don't have those major storms? What does that do to your cost? To anybody who's ever run a business, this is going to be really, really tough to enforce. How do you tell a business, a publicly traded business that has investors, you have to have a minimum number of people on? What if they say no? Is there another power company that's going to come in and do the job? Does anybody else have the right to do the job? So I have serious questions on what authority PURA actually has in this entire situation. We also have to look at this a little bit different way too. When this happened, and we talked about this on this podcast, there were notices given by the utility companies to PURA on what they expected the storm to be. And Eversource gave one category storm, and UI gave a much worse category storm. Had anybody in PURA been doing their job and compared these two, somebody with a brain should have said, wait a minute, why are these so drastically different? Why do we have such drastically different ideas about what's going to happen? And most would say UI performed much better. They were better prepared for the storm than Eversource was. So I blame PURA as well. I don't look at this as PURA didn't do anything wrong. PURA did do something wrong. They dropped the ball, no question about it. So now we're saying that let's give PURA more authority over the energy companies. But I don't see anything here holding PURA accountable. So yes, put your testimony in. And I'll link to this on Branford 7. We'll link to it on the Steve Mazzacane Podcast Facebook page and Guilford Atticus. Send your testimony in. Make sure people know, especially any financial losses you had. If you went shopping after the first storm, packed your fridge, and then a week later that was all gone, let people know that. If there was a medical thing that hurt your medicine and had to be refrigerated, or if there was some other financial impacts or clearly health impacts, let PURA know that, make that clear, send your testimony in for that. That helps. At the end of the day, I do question what PURA is actually going to be able to do. Because when you have one provider of something, They have all the power. You can regulate all day long. You can talk about it all day long. Eversource isn't going to go broke. They're going to turn a profit. Nobody's going to work for free. Their executives are going to get paid. If you start saying your executive can't get paid if there's more storms and they don't respond perfectly, then the talent drain happens. They're unable to hire the right talent for that position. That can hurt a company. How do you hire staffing and keep them on full time to make sure you're covered if there's major storms? What happens if there's not major storms? Do they become seasonal workers? Are they only on there during hurricane season? Where do they come from? Who are these people? If they're seasonal, do they go on unemployment when they're not there? So there's a million questions. And what happens with so many of these bills is we go through an issue, we face a crisis, we rush politically to say we're going to do X, Y, and Z to hold somebody accountable. And then we're going to pass a bill. All these ideas, they sound great. Reality? Probably not going to save you money. And probably might temporarily improve service, but likely not long term. So I find it unlikely this is going to drastically change anything, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't make sure your experience is known. So I will put that that notice and that link up that Robin Comey sent in. Okay, 2 weeks to go. We are 2 weeks away from a, it's interesting. Everybody always says every election is the most important election in your lifetime. And I'm not sure that every election is the most important in our lifetime. I'm not sure this is the most important in our lifetime. I look at the Bush-Gore election as probably the most direction-changing election ever. As much as looking at it from someone who leans left, I see the hatred for Trump. That hatred I had for Bush. Bush went and started wars without evidence. Bush caused hundreds of thousands of lives lost due to a specific act of his. You can talk about Trump and COVID and whether he's responsible for those deaths. There's no way he's responsible for those deaths. He's responsible for maybe some of those deaths. Maybe it could have been better. But as we talked about with COVID before, a president isn't just making a decision on whether he should shut down the government or not due to a crisis, of a health crisis. Because when those people lose their jobs, unemployment rate goes skyrocketing. What sociologists will tell you is unemployment rate goes up, people die. Suicide goes up. People have less money. Depression increases. Mental health issues come up. So it's not a matter of shut down the government, save lives. It's which evil are we going to try to control most? Because both options are bad. So it wasn't like zero people were going to die from COVID. We're always going to have some significant deaths from COVID. So you could blame Trump or not, and that's a different story. But I look at Bush as starting that war that never ended and lasted forever as far more egregious than anything Trump has done. And that came down to hanging Chads in Florida in a Supreme Court decision. Do I think this one comes down to a Supreme Court decision? I'm not sure, but let's go to the same source we always go to. Real Clear Politics, upper right-hand corner, race for president. Real Clear Politics national average, Biden at 51, Trump at 42. Biden is now plus 8.6. He was over 9. Actually, he was close to 10 a couple days ago. So when we're looking at polling, we know it's going to be off. We saw it ridiculously off 4 years ago. What is helpful and a little more accurate is to look at the same polls, even if they're off, over time. Because usually they tend to be equally off. If a poll is off 4 points and consistently off 4 points, then we can look at momentum. So we can say, Trump was down 4, then he was down 5, then Biden was up 6. So we saw all the momentum going with Biden. Now we're seeing polling numbers nationally going the other way. We saw it nationally hit over 10, 11 points, and some polls higher than that. The Real Clear Politics national average is now up 8.6. And that's an average, so there's going to be some outliers. So there's probably some polls that show him up 4 or 5, which means it's coming back down to earth. It's going to tighten. The real numbers we had to look at, I posted on my personal Facebook page yesterday, and they were that 15 days out, so yesterday in 2016, Hillary Clinton had a 4.8 point lead in battleground states, your Floridas and your Pennsylvanias and your Michigans, those type of states. Biden right now, at the same time period, is 4.1. Hillary was 4.8. Biden's 4.1. So, and actually, let's go to Real Clear Politics and look again. Battleground state, yesterday was 4.1. New polling's in, and we have Biden is now plus 3.9. Don't look at the national number. It's not relevant. As much as we want to talk about every vote matters and every commercial on TV is get your vote out, Connecticut doesn't matter. Connecticut's going for Biden. New York going for Biden. California going for Biden. It's nice to think we all matter, but the fact of the matter is we really don't on that race. There's a bunch of lower races that it matters a lot. On that race, it doesn't. Nationally, in the 5, 6, 7 states that really matter, this thing is getting tight. The same as it did 4 years ago. And there's a significant belief that a lot of Trump voters don't say they're Trump voters. And when they're polled, they don't say they not only do not say they're Trump voters, they'll literally say they're Biden voters. So you have a significant swing there when you take one voter from one side, don't just take him off the voting rolls, you say he's voting for the other side, you have a disproportionate number in support for Biden. So let's put it this way. If we look at Real Clear Politics right now, and in those swing states, Biden's up 3.9. Can the polls be off 4%? Yeah. And if there were Trump supporters that were looking to mislead the pollsters, that were not saying it, what states would they most likely be not telling them? In a swing state. You don't care in Connecticut. So is it unlikely that Trump could be within 4? Not really. This thing may be, electoral college-wise, really close, or if momentum really is with Trump, it's not shocking to think that this is a 1.5 point lead in a week. And then you're saying, is there a chance the polls are off just 2 points? I would say absolutely. And then Trump's right in this thing. So this thing is far from over. And talking to both sides, I mean, Democrats are afraid too. I see nervousness on, not necessarily locally. I mean, locally, this should be a Democratic sweep. I mean, no one would be shocked if a race gets close. Then good on you. But all the numbers show us, in order for Riccio or Laporta to win these races, they would need a lot of people to swap their votes. I don't see a massive rush along the shoreline of Connecticut of people who voted for Hillary last time suddenly voting for Trump. I see Trump maybe losing some. Certainly his base is rabid, and you can count, parades and things of that nature. It's not really relevant. You have a disproportionate percentage of the voice when you see those types of things. But I don't see that happening. I could be wrong, and we'll know election day or 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. But it's likely the Democrats take it. Nationally, this thing is up for grabs. And it's going to be amazing to see what happens during this next debate. Primarily because of this. When the first debate came, everybody said, okay, this is about Biden showing his competence, and he was fine. But now the numbers are actually starting to go the other way, which tells you something the Democrats don't want to admit. People like Donald Trump. They like him. There's a group that hates him. They hate him. But Donald Trump was in Home Alone movies. He had the #1 TV show on the planet. The whole planet was walking around saying, you're fired. He was on the front page of the paper constantly. And even if it was negative things about divorces, I remember an article on gold toilet bowls, but people ate it up. They bought those papers. People either like him or really want to like him. And if he comes out on that stage in that next debate, and even for a second looks presidential, people want to give him the benefit of the doubt. They just do. We have a history to show it. They want to like the guy. The guy's been through multiple divorces. He had a scandal with a porn star. He's got, a bunch of issues with women and all this other stuff and terrible quotes and all. They still want to like him. And I said this in a podcast about a month ago, how Biden's not up 25 points. I have no idea. Well, I do, because people want to like Trump. And to go a step further, you look at his numbers based on polling. We're going to take all those with a grain of salt. But his numbers are improving in the African-American community. He's not at 50%, but they're better than they were 4 years ago. They're improving in the Latino community. Again, not at 50%, but better than they were 4 years ago. It's fascinating. And the question on polling is, if the polling ends up wrong again and Trump wins, was it just a Trump factor or was the polling terrible? I think it's just a Trump factor. I think you cannot figure out what people are going to say about Trump. Right now, if you say you're a Trump supporter, you're going to get attacked all over social media, your neighbors, all that kind of stuff right now. It's kind of ugly. The left has gotten a little bit nuts. But in general, outside, when you take that left away, people deep down, for some reason, want to like Donald Trump. Listen, before somebody like that goes into a Home Alone movie, a lot of experts, a lot of branding people, a lot of people are asked, is it safe to put this person in? And they do. The #1 TV show. You can say he's successful or not at business, but he was certainly successful building a brand that people pay him millions of dollars to put his name on a building. And the numbers are going in his direction right now, even if slightly, despite the New York Times exposés on his taxes. Despite the hit pieces and some, whether they're accurate or not, I'm making no assumptions, but they're still going in that direction. People want to like him. It's amazing. So it's going to be a fascinating race, and we'll talk about it almost daily for the next 2 weeks, obviously, as we look at the numbers. But more than anything else, I don't care about the 7.9 or the 8.1, or I care about momentum. What is it over time? Over the next week, what do these numbers do? And if we're seeing momentum, elections are almost like if you watch football and you're a fan of the New York Giants. So the last couple times the Giants have won a Super Bowl, they were not a very good team. They were 9-7, never by any means the best team in football during the regular season. But what happened was they got hot at the right time. They had momentum at the end, and then they beat the 19-0 or the 18-0 Patriots to make them 18-1, and they beat the Patriots a second time. They were hot at the right time. Trump did this 4 years ago, and the early signs are, the numbers show us, it looks like that may happen again. It's on that path. Now, we're going to wait a couple days. On Thursday, we'll look at this again. Next Monday, we'll look at this again. But if he cuts that down another point or two, that means he has momentum. And I don't care what kind of attack. I mean, the guy, whether it's all true or not, doesn't matter. He's been attacked mercilessly by the media and by the left, and somehow he's still in this race. Somehow, for some reason, people want to like him. I lived in New York City for a year in the late 90s. He was on the front of the paper constantly. He was a massive, massive celebrity. All right, so let's go to this question yesterday, and I brought it up briefly. I talked to a lot of town officials, so I know what's going on agendas and what's being proposed. I was pretty shocked by this. I went to the Black Lives Matter rally. It was fine. There were some people with signs. There were some people yelling about the police, but it wasn't over the top. The police had their shit together. They were calm. They managed everything fine. One of them got up. People were yelling at him. He got up and he held some sign. Then there was another rally with a bunch of kids, some Black Lives Matter, some a group called Save for Branford. I'm not sure which one actually ran the show, but that's where you saw a bunch of fuck the police signs. And they were marching from the high school to the police station and had a rally there. And again, the police managed it fine, no issues, took care of things. In fact, at the first rally, they removed someone who was against the rally, against Black Lives Matter. So that's why when you see things like this, Tom Brockett sends forward, I'm just going to read the first few lines of this resolution. Tom Brockett is the minority leader, the top-ranking Democrat on the RTM. I would say the top-ranking Democrat from an elected position is Ray Dunbar, a former police officer. So I guess he had nothing to do with this, but I'd be, whatever. We'll let him answer that. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions there. But in any event, this is the resolution. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's long and extremely vague. Like, it's just nonsense. Whereas the town acknowledges that, in all caps, Black Lives Matter. Now, in all caps is significant because the town acknowledges Black Lives Matter, lowercase is just a sentence. Now we have a proper noun in here. Whereas the town of Brantford acknowledges that the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, as well as too many others, are senseless acts of violence that have horrified us and shaken our community. Whereas the town of Brantford acknowledges that such incidents show the prevalence of systemic racism within our society. Whereas systemic racism unfairly disadvantages specific individuals and communities while unfairly giving advantages to other individuals and communities and saps the strength of the whole of society. Whereas racism is a root cause of poverty and constricts economic mobility. This was written to inflame. This was written to start a fight. This is political bullshit by the Democrats in Brantford. And it just keeps going on like this. There's nothing about this resolution that is trying to bring people together. There's nothing about this resolution that is trying to be logical. You had the police deal with this group in a respectful, logical, intelligent manner. And then we have elected officials on the Democratic side put this forward. What this really is a plan to go after Jamie Cosgrove. What they want to do, they can't win on local issues. They can't win talking about the new school or the new community house. They fought some of those things. They can't win talking about the environment because Jamie Cosgrove is far more pro-environment than any Democrat before him. Solar panels and trails and town-owned parks and making public Brantford Hills a park and massive energy conservation plans, which Democrats voted against because they're just stupid. So they have to make it as national as they can. And they want to keep their base riled up. So they put in a nonsense resolution like this. Nobody's for racism. But saying it's systemic, that Brantford is basically part of it, support of Black Lives Matter, is an affront to the police department. Black Lives Matter has called for their losing money, being defunded, in many cases disbanded. It has been clearly in the debate is Black Lives Matter versus police departments. So Democrats just threw everything behind one group. There's nothing about that that says I'm a good municipal leader. There's nothing about that that says I believe in bringing people together. This is sent in by Tom Brockett. Tom Brockett, for lack of any better word, is a piece of shit. It's just what he is. And it's consistent. There's always something dumb and false and nonsensical coming out of this man's mouth. Why does anybody on that party listen to this man? I can't make sense of it. I haven't heard one redeeming thing from him yet. One thing that makes sense yet. And it's hard to put up with somebody whose goal, listen, we have the Wayne Cooks of the world. We have those people who want to start, they get their kicks off getting attention on nonsense. We have that. This is an elected official starting crap, starting nonsense. I feel bad for our police department. Jamie Cosgrove can handle himself. People with a brain are going to laugh this out of the room. There's a million ways to say we support equality and equal rights. There are laws we abide by which manage that. There's much bigger ways to make sure there's equality, to make sure there's access. We provide far more services, better educational facilities. We provide more parks and open space. We keep our mill rate down so people can actually move to Brantford. Those are things that help. They want the town to put up a flag saying we support Black Lives Matter. No one with a brain will do that. Black Lives Matter has no lock on the racism argument or the equality argument. There's a million other ways to do that. So I've gotten some calls. That's what the resolution is. And it's more of the same stuff. It just keeps going. Town is committed to making anti-racism stances a central tenet in all its programs, policies, administrative actions, and all other matters that impact Brantford residents by working with and listening to the Black community. That's fine. Working together to support community efforts to focus attention on issues of racism. I don't know if focusing attention on issues is the best way to go about anything, but I think creating a equal and logical system where everybody has the same opportunity. Asserting that racism is a public health crisis affecting Brantford and all of Connecticut. No one's going to sign this. No one's going to lock themselves into this or any sort of loyalty to one political group. And the truth of the matter is, we do a lot in this town to make sure everybody has equal opportunity. Should we have a little bit better education on it? I don't have a problem with that. Should we look into potential what was slavery in this town? What is the Black experience? I have no issue with that. Am I going to lead off a resolution with Black Lives Matter organization and talk about specific crime, some murders, some whatever the details of individual? No, of course not. I'm going to do that. No, not going to happen. And it's just a political game by Tom Brockett and the Brantford Democrats. The Brantford Democrats need new blood. They need somebody with a brain. Because right now, there's no evidence anybody over there has a brain. There's nothing in this that says, I'm going to bring people together. There's nothing in this that says, I believe in equality. What this actually says is, I want to tie the first selectman's hands into taking a stance on racism. There's no stance to take on racism. Nobody's for racism. There are laws that make sure there are equal opportunities. The town is an equal opportunity employer. Are there things in the education system we can do make better? Possibly. I'll let the experts decide that. But at the end of the day, this is just a political ploy, and it's nonsense. Hopefully, the smarter people in the room realize that and just laughed us out of the room. So that's my answer to that. If there are more questions, send them in. But, you know, at the end of the day, everything is about politics. Everything is about winning. You know, you have, every once in a while, you have people like the first selectman who is not into national politics, right? He's into Brantford. But there's whole groups of people on the Democrat and Republican side, and their goal is to lie or mislead or to rile up people so they can win. They could put on their resume, I won this huge race and I got this guy out of office. Because the hardcore Democrats only care about getting a Democrat in office. And the hardcore Republicans only care about getting a Republican in office. And if we're not careful, those people outnumber the people who actually care about doing good. The people who care about the town they're in. Hopefully, we never get to that point. All right, we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Went a little bit late today, so thanks for sticking with me. I'll be back tomorrow at 4. Remember, you can watch this on Brantford 7 or the Steve Mazzican podcast page. We'll be promoting that statewide fairly soon. And I want to thank you for all the support. Today, a few people stopped me at a few different restaurants to say thanks for the podcast. Anything you want to see, suggestions, things of that nature, please just send them in. Until then, I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Thanks for joining me. Have a good night.